Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this forum for the invite. And for the attendees for participating in such a high-level forum. I would like to thank the organizers for their hospitality. Today's topic is one of the most important topics related to humanity. Before I start, I would like to repeat word in our language, or a proverb, which means that honey is sweet, but children are even sweeter. And also there's another proverb which in Turkmen means we value and love children, but raising them up is more valuable than anything else. Every child should be brought up with a lot of care and love. In Turkmenistan, when we raise children, we give them great attention so that children learn our heritage, our customs and traditions, friendship, being merciful, and understanding and tolerating others. We have to understand that bringing up children is a great responsibility, and at the same time we make sure we pass traditions and customs from one generation to another, and we teach children on friendship, on being kind. We focus a lot in our work on relief and humanitarian aid. So all of these procedures include a lot of humanitarian work. We have to provide the enabling environment to provide such aid. We try to lift all obstacles so that the youth can benefit from all of the available opportunities in Turkmenistan and benefit from the state policy. We guarantee that all services are provided to the people, and the government does its best in order to provide everybody with equal opportunities. Those services include education, legal assistance, financial assistance, education, healthcare. Of course, when raising children, we try to always do that in harmony. We defend their rights, and this is of a great concern for the state. This is a top priority, and this is also mentioned in many conventions that Turkmenistan is a part of, including the Charter of Children's Rights. So we have joined this convention a long time ago. We started, or we were partners to other countries in order to defend the rights of the youth, their health, and even in hardships and during climate change. We have put strategic plans in order to support children since a very young age. There are strategic projects that focus on the children, and the government has signed a document on this regard, and that started in March 2025. There have been governmental committees and other also governmental institutions and other committees under the Ministry of Health worked on that. On the 25th of October 2025, an agreement was concluded by the government in order to continue developing the children, and we have joined UNICEF in that time. There's also a program for the years 2026-2027, and the relevant committee at the government will draft an agreement or a document on that, all that in collaboration with UNICEF in order to defend children's rights and provide social support to the families, provide scholarships, and also in order to help different age groups. Moreover, we give a priority to children with special needs or with disabilities. UNICEF and the government of Turkmenistan are partners to defend every child in order to protect them. And we have entered into this collaboration in order to protect the children from diseases and illnesses, and that's why we have signed a new agreement on the purchasing of food and nutrients. I would like to reiterate here the United Nations is collaborating with different governmental committees in Turkmenistan and also with international organizations. And this is to provide the best for the children according to international standards. In the past years, we tried to support children that were affected by environmental consequences in different regions. There are some children that received medical care, and this shows that this kindness that the Turkmen people are known for shall be available to everybody and should be an example to be followed, especially in situations similar to the ones we're passing through. We have to commit to international commitments, and this year Turkmenistan celebrates 30 years of joining the United Nations. We would like to conclude this year with a lot of peace and trust. We do that by dialogue, by being open to dialogue based on friendship, equality, respect, in order to achieve a progress and to have a better future for our children. Thank you all for your kind listening.
Core of humanity, and thank you for listing all the steps Turkmenistan is taking to enshrine the rights of children, both domestically and internationally. Again, thank you everyone for taking part in this panel. Obviously, the issue of the evolving ways in which armed conflict impacts children is an issue that affects us all. It's an emotive and a very pressing issue, and it's one that is also on the minds of policymakers. According to the UN Children in Armed Conflict Annual Report from this year, there were a record 36,221 grave violations committed against children in 2024, itself a 25% increase on 2023, which was the previous record year. According to the report, 11,967 children were killed or maimed across the globe last year, again, the highest number since the report began over 25 years ago. And obviously here in the Middle East, perhaps the most strongest example of this is in Gaza, where health authorities say 6,000 children have suffered amputation or have suffered severe limb or spinal injury, and more than 20,000 have been killed. So this is an issue that perhaps isn't at the very top of all conferences, but is underlined through a lot of the issues that we've been discussing today. So I would like to briefly introduce our panelists. Her Excellency Oguljahan Atabeyeva is a Turkmen medical professional with over 2 decades of experience in obstetrics, gynecology, public health, nutrition, and medical leadership. She graduated from the Turkmen Medical State Institute in 2002 and served as obstetrician, gynecologist, at the Maternal and Child Healthcare Hospital in Ashgabat from 2003 to 2020. Since December 2024, she has served as the Vice President for Medical Activities of the Charitable Fund for Assistance to Children in Need of Guardianship, named after Gubangali Bartahimedov, where she leads strategic program development and medical oversight for vulnerable children. Ms. Vanessa Frazier of Malta was appointed Under-Secretary General and UN Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children in Armed Conflict on October 3rd of this year, and she brought with her decades of leadership in the diplomatic realm and commitment to the mandate of child protection. A former ambassador and a permanent representative of Malta to the UN during its Security Council tenure, Special Representative Frazier has championed child protection in conflict settings. She also served as chair of the Security Council Working Group on Children in Armed Conflict. Of course, we have with us Sara Minkara, the former US Special Advisor on International Disability Rights, serving at the ambassador level. During her tenure, she integrated disability into US foreign policy in more than 70 countries in sectors ranging from AI to climate change to security. She also created the Disability Foreign Policy Playbook. Sara also founded the Empowerment Through Integration, a global nonprofit, expanding opportunities for youth with disabilities in the MENA region. Ms. Minkara has developed and is currently teaching the first ever course on disability and diplomacy at Georgetown University. So we have here on stage a wide array of expertise from multilateral diplomacy to foreign policy, academia, and health and charity. So I'd like to just go off straight into questions since we've started a bit late. My first question is for you, Your Excellency. A cornerstone of humanitarian response and child protection is the strong partnerships between multilateral organizations and charitable organizations. Your Excellency, can you tell us more about the activities of the Charitable Foundation?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Because my...
No worries.
Sorry.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the activities of the Charitable Foundation, and how does it fall under the strategic priorities of Turkmenistan, which you mentioned a short moment ago?
Спасибо большое за ваш вопрос. Меня представили, я являюсь вице-президентом по лечебной части благотворительного фонда имени Гурбангулы Бердмухамедова по оказанию помощи детям, нуждающимся в опеке. И нашей основной работой нашего фонда, как известно,
Our main work is children and caring for the children. Those children are of great concern to us. Many of those children are disabled or have limited capacities. Of course, we do not leave any child behind. We try to help everybody, every child who comes forward. I said in my opening remarks about a strategy we follow and about the priorities of the fund we have in Turkmenistan. The most important thing for us is education, social education, and we spend a lot on the psychological support of the children. We teach the children social values, religious values. We also aim at enhancing education. So our charity fund provides support for children in three main domains. Social, first of all, as well as education at the educational level, but medical support is our greatest focus. As I said before, we care about the children with limited capacities. And I would like here to reiterate that our charity fund is special, for we have a healthcare facility that provides support and healthcare to children incessantly. And most of these children are children with health illnesses at the level of neurology and the brain. We have the most advanced equipment to support those children, and this enables us to achieve progress and to see the children becoming better day after the other. Of course, in our charity fund, we have a kindergarten. We have 160 children in the kindergarten. It's not a big number, but we provide them with high-level education. And this is very important to us and to the children equally, especially children with disability. Those children are doing very well in this kindergarten. In general, children are a priority in our country, and caring for the children is a priority for the government.
To making sure no child is left behind through education, through health, and social services. And I know it's one aspect of child protection is providing those services, and the other is addressing the violations. So my next question is to you, Special Representative Frazier. From Ukraine to Gaza, from Sudan to Congo, we've seen violations on the rise by both non-state actors and armed groups, as verified by CAC itself. How can the international community, particularly the Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General for Children in Armed Conflict, strengthen accountability and protection mechanisms to address this rise in grave violations against children in conflict zones, and in particular, children with disabilities?
Thank you very much. This mandate was created almost 30 years ago because it was identified in a groundbreaking report that children are disproportionately affected in war. And we all agree here and around the world that children are the epitome of innocence, right? They are our future. We take policy decisions based on children. We educate them in order to build our futures with them. But unfortunately, they remain collateral of war. And as you have seen, our numbers are only increasing. And actually, the numbers that we report are not even the entire picture of what we are seeing. So let us just put that into perspective. There's so much that we can do for children if we all work together. It is so important that we advocate for them, for protecting them. As you said, the Security Council has identified 6 grave violations against children. So my office has the world's leading monitoring mechanism on these violations, and we need to do more for children on this because we need to have disaggregated data. We need to have data which shows us the impact on disabled children. Children with disabilities are already discriminated against in peacetime. So imagine in wartime, in conflict situations, they usually are the last ones to receive protection or assistance. We have to change that because nobody must be left behind. And when we are building our futures, we really need to ensure that there is equal access to all children within all the diversity and irrespective of their abilities, right? So things that we can do together is one of the things that I want to do in my job now is to advocate with the countries where we have crisis situations, where we have children affected by crisis, to work with each country to work out action plans. How are we going to protect children? During times of war, children need to be able to continue their education. This is fundamental. We know that international humanitarian law does not allow the attacks on schools, but that is also one of the great violations. Attacks on schools, on hospitals, is a great violation that we monitor and report on. Children in times of war should not have to choose between education and security. They should be able to go to school confidently and know that they are able to continue to dream of their future. I was in Nairobi just a week ago talking with young children from conflict situations, and we were commemorating the 10th year anniversary of the Safe School Declaration. And one child told me, a school is a place where you walk in as a person that you are, but you walk out as a person you dream to be. That is such a true message. We have to repeat this to leaders, to humanitarian workers on the ground, to governments, and to all parties to conflicts, that this dream has to be present for children, even during conflict. Schools need to be safe. We were talking about education. Her Excellency spoke about education at length in her keynote introduction, and this is one of the foundations of protecting children in crisis.
Thank you, Special Representative. I hear there, several messages. One is an integrated approach, and two, keeping pressure on policymakers and governments, and three, also looking at education and other realms, not simply humanitarian aid. And speaking of humanitarian aid, Sara, you've been around in foreign policy circles and the international system for many years as an expert and advocate and at ambassador level. In your experience, what are the gaps in the humanitarian response to conflict that are leaving children with disabilities behind? And what steps can the international community take to address these gaps?
Thank you, Taylor, and it's so wonderful to be with you all here today. So I want to, illustrate kind of and put context in terms of what is the current landscape and situation for children with disabilities during moments of conflict. As we mentioned, children with disabilities are left behind. We're invisible in most situations, and at best, if we are visible, we are seen from a very narrow lens of you're vulnerable. One time someone told me, someone who's not counted does not count. And in most of spaces that we're in, children with disabilities are not counted. So let me give you a few examples that we've seen on the ground. Let's take an example of Ukraine. When the first initial moments of Ukrainian conflict, bomb shelters were inaccessible. Children with disabilities who were in institutions, there's still a lot of children with disabilities in institutions, were left behind because people had wanted to go and save themselves. So children with disabilities were left behind in institutions. Humanitarian aid was not reaching them. Caregivers of kids with disabilities who are male above age of 18, for the longest time were not allowed to cross the border. Let's go to Gaza. Assistive technology were seen as dual usage. We're not let in. And if a kid with a disability doesn't have their assistive technology, they're more at risk of being a victim. Evacuation signals were not accessible. Evacuation frameworks that said, okay, you have to evacuate within a certain time frame. And Ghazal, a 14-year-old girl who has CP, cerebral palsy, turns to her mom and says, Mom, you go and save yourself, because if you stay, we're gonna both die. And I can go on forever. But one of the most important things that I've seen over and over again is children with disabilities voices, persons with disabilities voices in armed conflict are non-visible. Data needs to be addressed and mandated. In most space agencies, actually data is not mandated. We need to collect data because we need to know where kids with disabilities are and be able to actually serve and be able to provide their needs. Emergency plans and responses for government need to have kids with disabilities at the center. We need to ensure that humanitarian financing mandates that disabilities at the center. So many donor countries come together and finance humanitarian response and aid, and disability is not even present. Or at best, it might be a special project. We need to mandate that it's mainstreamed across all of our humanitarian financing. We need to ensure that implementing partners are required to work with OPDs, Organization of Persons with Disabilities. So many implementing partners say, well, I don't know. Maybe we don't know where they are, or they don't adhere to our bureaucratic standards. Work with them. They should be your partners from the get-go. Something I hear over and over again say, well, everyone is at risk in conflict and crisis. Sorry, kids with disabilities are disproportionately at risk. When we talk about recovery and reconstruction, disability and accessibility needs to be at the table, because not only do we have kids with disabilities from the get-go, but more disabilities being created. I've been to multiple Ukraine recovery conferences, and I would hear, let's build rebuild green Ukraine. I want to hear, let's rebuild green and accessible Ukraine. It should be a given, because we need to start looking for the future of these kids. Short term, with their health and education, all the way to the long term, that their voices are part of the rebuilding and reconstruction. When we look at these systems, if we center the needs and the voices of children with disabilities, it will then benefit everyone. And that should be our focus. It's not a pity thing to do. It's not just a special thing to do. It is the right thing to do. And you know what? It's a smart thing to do. Thank you.
Very excellent and comprehensive remarks. I can hear in there the need not only for data, not only for organizations being mandated to work with people with disabilities, but also implementing partners on the ground who perhaps have more of a reach and can actually play a larger role than they are. Real quick, I would like to open up to questions to the audience, but real quick, I have two very short questions. First, Special Representative Frazier, you mentioned the grave violations on schools. What can the international community do to stop or limit the targeting of schools and the use of schools for military operations?
Unfortunately, as United Nations, we have to work as a team with the international community and with other leaders who will advocate for this, because we do have declarations. We do know international humanitarian law already does not allow schools to be attacked. Schools are a safe space, and in fact, we've seen in some crisis situations where people go to shelter in schools because they have been taught that it is a safe place, and then the school is attacked. So we monitor and report these. Of course, countries are listed in our report if they commit this grave violation. And then there are a set of tools that can come out of that. So there could be sanctions against countries. But we really do need to advocate with a loud voice to countries that are in conflict situations that schools need to be safe havens. And we need to show an utter disdain and for countries that do not honor this. Really, the international community needs to speak out loudly and as often as possible. But there's a lot that we can do also in peace processes, you know, in mediation. We have to, these conditions of peace, the safety of schools could be conditions of peace. Breaching that, an attack on schools, could also be considered a breach of the ceasefire, for example. Right? So there are actions, concrete actions that can be taken. And I know here in Doha, where there are so many processes that are being mediated, this is something that we advocate for and that we know that the mediators work on here, because child rights are very important. Schools need to remain safe. It is extremely important. And there's a lot that we can do together, which is tangible. And we need to make sure that every tool that we have available to us is used for that. And it needs to be a condition to peace.
So it sounds like addressing the violation of schools can happen in the mediation process before the conflict is addressed or solved. And speaking about post-conflict era, Sara, really quick to you, I wanted to ask, you've mentioned before the need not to look at people with disabilities with only a charity lens as recipients of aid, but the need to include them as partners, as people who can innovate and contribute. In your view, what can the international community do better to include children with disabilities in the vision for the future of their societies post-conflict?
So I'm going to answer this question in two different ways. One is, how do we get actually member states, governments, international organizations, NGOs, agencies to actually bring the voices of persons with disabilities and children with disabilities to the table? It starts off actually with changing the narrative, because we still have a narrative in our society where we don't see the value that people with disabilities can bring forward. We're still seen at best from a social protection lens. The way we disrupt these narratives is by engaging with media, entertainment, all these different sectors to bring out more of the voices, the stories, the perspective. Because to be honest, until society says, hey, governments, we need to hold you accountable, we need to make sure people and children with disabilities voices are at the table. There's the UN Security Council Resolution 2475, which talks about the protection of people with disabilities in armed conflict. Okay, that was established in 2019. Implementation and accountability so far from there. Again, we need society to actually demand this. And then in order for us to truly implement this, we need to make sure we're working with local OPDs, organization of persons with disabilities, building their capacity, bringing them to the table. We need to make sure we're also building the capacity for frontline workers and staff. We need to make sure that there's a UN disability inclusion strategy, that there's more support backing this, and in terms of funding, budget, and implementation. When there's been a lot of budget cuts right now, what gets cut first is a lot of times the disability stuff. We need more accountability. And that starts off with disrupting the narrative and having society demanding our inclusion from the get-go.
Thank you, Sara. Those sound like very actionable items. They're not very, high in the cloud, hard to get to goals. These seems are very actionable items that organizations can take very clearly, as you outlaid. I would like real quick to take it to the audience if there are any questions. I think there's a mic that's supposed to go around. Yes?
Thank you. It's more of a thank you than a comment for bringing OPDs to the table. I work in Haiti where children with disabilities, I always say, we talk about IDPs, and we say, to me, displacement is a luxury because you can at least move from place A to place B, point A to point B. So thank you for definitely mentioning that there must be a requirement. My small foundation, we require that any small grant that I get, that we work with persons with disabilities, and that can be done at a higher level, but then we don't get that in the funding from the big NGOs that get it, and unfortunately, we're limited in what we can do. We're imposed by larger NGOs. So we talk about localization a lot, but no one really listens to us. And then when you deviate a little bit from the funding, we get in trouble, even though we know that there is a need to include persons with disabilities. So thank you for mentioning that, and I hope that whoever is listening requires, the same way we require to have 10% women, that we require persons with disabilities also to be at the table. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. It sounds like these larger NGOs are imposing their agendas that are leaving children with disabilities behind, whereas local organizations such as yourselves are putting it front and center. So it sounds like there is a bit of a mismatch that is occurring. Yes.
Thank you so much for this panel. My name is Oguljahan. I'm an investigator with Amnesty International. I work with the team that documents situations in armed conflict and crises. And we work a lot on the situation of children and people with disabilities in armed conflict. So my question is both for the Special Representative and for Sara. And Sara, you kind of touched on it, but the mandate, the CAC mandate has been there, as you said, Special Representative, for close to 30 years. There was the resolution 2475 in 2019 and the IASC guidelines that came out around that time. So we do have the frameworks, the MRM reporting, the guidelines for humanitarian actors. But what is your honest assessment or answer as to why, despite the fact that we have these frameworks, it's 2025 and we're still talking about disaggregated data, about working with OPDs, about inclusion and its absence. I mean, I go to the field from DRC to Haiti to Myanmar to Syria, and we're still persistently seeing these same problems. So what is your honest answer as to why we're still seeing this? Thank you.
Shall I take it first? Yeah. So in my experience, even from being in the field, first of all, it is so unfortunate that in times of crisis, children in general, children are still considered collateral damage, still, when there's a crisis ongoing. So we see this. But you do not see actors who are, in conflict take special care not to harm kids. You don't see it. So obviously, then children with disabilities are disproportionately affected. So the system, at the moment, we have lost perhaps a bit of our moral compass, should I say, in armed conflict. There are schools which are systematically attacked, schools which are known. They are marked on maps as schools, right, and hospitals. They are known to be this. People go to shelter in them specifically because supposedly international law says that they are a protected area. But we have seen that there is this sense of impunity and that countries feel that they can bomb schools if they feel that there is perhaps they claim that they have information that terrorists are hiding inside, right? But international law also says that there should be proportionality.
when you are considering these attacks. But if there isn't accountability by other states, if other states do not take a moral stand about this, nothing is going to change. So we have the mechanisms, but we cannot implement anything because finally it's states that need to implement. States are the ones that have to decide, I am going to take a tool out of this toolbox and implement it for accountability, for prevention in a certain conflict situation. Member states need to step up, basically.
If I can just add one last thing, what Vanessa shared is exactly that. And one thing that in the disability community I hear over and over again, I heard this over and over again, we feel like we're an acceptable loss in moments of crisis. Society has gotten to the point where it's like, it's an acceptable loss. Number two is, when I do talk to people in the humanitarian work, a lot of times they say, well, Sara, everyone's impacted. What do you want me to do? And that defeatist mentality, or that mentality that everyone's impacted. Yes, I understand everyone's, but no, kids with disabilities are disproportionately impacted. And I think this is where we need to keep illustrating and showcasing how we are disproportionately impacted, and on the other hand, how when you do serve the needs of kids with disabilities, it will ultimately benefit everyone. Those are things we need to keep elevating and illustrating. I think we have lost our moral compass in this thing. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you to the panelists. I mean, I think one takeaway perhaps for everyone is that there is a need for moral clarity, for political will, and the willingness to take a stand from states and non-state actors. We've seen too little of that in recent years, and here's hoping that we can start to see states and non-state actors actually take a stand and be held accountable. Thank you everyone for coming. I know it's a very deep subject, hard to cover in one single day, let alone 45 minutes. But I'd like to close with a 1 minute closing remark from each panelist, starting with Her Excellency.
Okay, so I'm switching to English now. Okay, I think in a previous question you asked with which UN agencies we're working with. I think I dropped that one. I just want to give an answer for that. We're closely working with UNICEF, and our cooperation started in March with the signing MOU between our foundation and UNICEF, and since March we're in a very close cooperation. Fortunately or unfortunately, yet I don't know, but we have no any experience working with children in crisis places. We have experience more working with children with disabilities. In our country also we have experience volunteering aid as well. But finalizing today's speech, I just would like to wish that every child would be safe in this world, and we are, as a charity fund, we will do all we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I mean, it's a very resonant message, the need for safety for every child, and that no child is left behind. Special Representative Frazier?
In my mandate, I really do pledge to give voices of children importance and to put them front and center. And in fact, my office has a campaign which is ongoing called Prove It Matters, where we meet with children all over the world who are in conflict situations, but not also, but to ask for their messages to leaders. And I take these messages with me. They then fill them into these origami dolls that you will see me with. And this is one message I brought from a child in Burundi who told me to tell the world leaders, we need children with disabilities to have access to education.
to access education. I'm sorry, it's a child's handwriting. This can be accomplished by increasing the numbers of schools that can accommodate them. It's what we're discussing later. Accessibility is important in peacetime, but also in war. When we are reconstructing after war, and after crisis, and after schools have been bombed down, we have to ensure that whatever is being rebuilt has accessibility, that children with disabilities can go back to school. So thank you very much, a 16-year-old girl from Burundi who wrote this message and gave me the opportunity to read it out tonight. This is why we are doing this, because we want children to advocate for children.
And I think it's wonderful how a message from a child has a more clear solution than anything a policymaker can say. I think the more that we listen to children with disabilities, the more we can find durable solutions than perhaps gathering at conferences. Sara?
I will say, let's mandate to collect disaggregated data. Let's mandate that we work with OPDs and break down barriers so we can work with OPDs. Let's mandate a humanitarian financing to mainstream disability. Let's center all of our work that brings in the children with disabilities needs and voices, because that's going to benefit everyone. Let's continue bringing forward the stories of kids with disabilities and what they can bring forward and the value they can bring forward in society, and the peacemaking, recovery, reconstruction, everything. And I think there's so much more that we can kind of elevate in terms of their stories from a point of value and not a point of pity, and I feel bad for you.
And I think I'd like to add the importance of these stories not only in times of conflict, but in post-conflict reconstruction. Very, very important. I would like a round of applause for our esteemed panelists. And thank you, everyone, for sticking with us for the end of a long day, and I hope you have a great rest of the forum. Thank you.